crow feather. My boss told me it was probably just some art student or a transient getting creative. I didn't believe him. These things felt older. They felt like a warning. That's when I first met Elias Vance. He was a photographer, a man in his late 50s with a face tanned like old leather and an air of absolute certainty. He'd been hiking these mountains since before I was born, and he made sure I knew it. I found him aiming a long lens at the Pinecone Pyramid. "Morning," I said. He grunted, not taking his eye from the viewfinder. "Someone's got a lot of time on their hands." "I'd rather people not disturb the area," I told him, "or leave things behind." He finally lowered his camera and gave me a condescending smile. "Son, it's folk art. Probably some burnout living in a tent. I'm hoping to catch him in the act. Might be a good series." Hermit of the Smokies. I told him I was closing the spur trail until I could figure it out. That's when he laughed, a dry, crackling sound. "You do that. I know other ways up the Bald." He packed his gear, gave me a final nod, and disappeared down the path. His confidence bothered me more than the structures did. The mountains don't reward that kind of pride. The next week, his wife reported him missing. His Subaru was parked at the trailhead, right where I'd seen him. A knot of ice formed in my gut. We organized a search team, but I went in first, alone, at dawn. The air was cold and sharp. I walked past the rib spiral and the cone pyramid. About 200 yards past the second display, I found his camera. It was lying in the dirt, the expensive lens shattered as if it had been slammed against a rock. Beside it, half pressed into the mud by a heavy boot print, was a single, large feather. It was mottled brown and gray, thick as a turkey feather, but shaped all wrong, with a stiff, almost woody quill. I'd never seen anything like it. I knew then this wasn't a standard search and rescue. I radioed in the discovery of the camera, but kept the feather. I told the team to focus on the main trail network and the slopes leading down to the creek. I needed to go where they wouldn't. I needed to follow Elias's pride. I followed the faint scuffs in the leaves that led away from the camera, deeper into the thicket, off any recognizable path. The forest grew darker, quieter. The normal chatter of squirrels and birds died away. The only sound was my own breathing and the crunch of my boots. Then I heard it. A high, piercing shriek. The cry of a red-tailed hawk. But it was wrong. It was too rhythmic, too perfect. And it was coming from the ground, not the sky. It echoed from a dense patch of rhododendron just ahead. I dropped into a crouch, my hand on the small canister of bear spray on my belt. The hawk cry came again, closer this time. I crept forward, using the thick trunks of the tulip poplars for cover. Through a gap in the leaves, I saw it. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, but it wasn't a bear. It was covered in those same mottled brown feathers, a camouflage so perfect it blended seamlessly with the dead leaves and dappled light. It stood on 2 thick, powerful legs that ended in black, 3-toed talons. It had no wings to speak of, just stunted vestigial limbs tucked against its feathered torso. Its head was large and avian, with a cruel hooked beak and wide, dark eyes that scanned the forest with an unnerving intelligence. It let out the hawk cry again, a perfect mimicry, its throat vibrating. It wasn't hunting. It was communicating. It turned its head, and I saw what it was guarding. A shallow overhang beneath a rock shelf, almost a small cave. Inside the cave, something moved. It was Elias Vance. He was alive. His leg was bent at a sickening angle, a crude splint of branches and his own belt tied around it. He was pale, terrified, but alive. And he wasn't alone. Huddled near him were 3 smaller versions of the creature, about the size of large turkeys, covered in fluffy down. They chirped and shuffled around the injured man. The scene snapped into focus with horrifying clarity. The displays weren't art or warnings. They were territorial markers for a nursery. This creature, this impossible bird, was apparent. It had seen Elias, the intruder with his big glass eye, get too close to its young. It hadn't killed him. It had neutralized the threat. It broke his leg, dragged him back to its nest, and was keeping him. In a corner of the overhang, I saw a small pile of dead squirrels and a half-eaten rabbit. It was feeding him. It was keeping its larder fresh for its growing brood. The creature took a step toward the cave, and I knew I had seconds to act. Calling for the team would be a death sentence, for them or for the creatures. They'd come in with guns against something they couldn't understand. I unclipped a magnesium flare from my pack. I lit the striker and threw it hard, far to my left. It hit the dry leaves with a bright, sputtering hiss, and a plume of white smoke billowed up. The giant bird screeched, a sound of alarm this time, not mimicry. It forgot Elias, forgot the nest, and crashed through the undergrowth toward the unfamiliar threat of fire and smoke. "Elias?" I whispered, rushing to the cave. "Elias, it's Jackson. Can you walk?" His eyes were wide with a terror I'll never forget. It brought me food," he stammered. "It thought I was one of them." There was no time. I pulled him up, his arm slung over my shoulder, his broken leg dragging uselessly. Every step was agony for him, every snapped twig a gunshot in the silent woods. Behind us, the creature's calls changed. The alarm turned to rage as it realized its prize was gone. We stumbled on, a desperate 3-legged race against a nightmare. We reached the main trail as the first rays of sun cut through the canopy. We didn't look back. I told everyone he fell, broke his leg, got disoriented. Elias, humbled and broken, backed my story without hesitation. I officially closed that whole section of the park for a year, citing rockslide hazards. No one questioned it. Back in the ranger station, I spent nights digging through old archives. I found it in a dusty, forgotten volume of park history, a collection of interviews from the 1930s with elderly Cherokee who had grown up in these mountains. They spoke of the Tla'anuwa, the great mythical hawks. But they also spoke of something else, a different legend the ethnographers had mostly ignored. They called it Kalona Ayelis, the ground raptor. It was said to mimic the calls of other birds to fool prey and guard its nests hidden in the high balds. It was fiercely protective, known to carry off anything that threatened its young. The stories said they didn't kill men, but kept them until they starved or were fed to the chicks. They were not monsters, just parents. Parents that had been living in these mountains, hidden for centuries. My name is Corbin Maddox, and this happened to me in 2009 in the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, Georgia. I took the ranger post because I loved the quiet sheets of black water and the slow language of egrets lifting at dawn. I thought I understood the swamp. I had no idea what lived beneath it. The first warning came with the tourists. A retired couple out of Mobile rented a John boat and never returned. We dragged the channels for 2 days and found nothing but their cooler wedged in reeds, lid stove in, ice melted. No teeth marks, no blood, just gone. I filed the report, wrote it up as a likely capsizing, and tried to ignore the sour fear gnawing my gut. 2 weeks later, I found the tracks. I was checking firebreak clearings on foot when I saw a line of prints crossing a mud flat on Billy's Island. 5-toed, webbed like an otter. but each pad was the size of my hand and the claws dragged trenches. The distance between strides said the animal stood nearly 4 feet at the shoulder. I knelt beside one, and the mud stank of dead fish. I radioed headquarters. My supervisor, Graham Tyner, told me to photograph, flag, and move on. His voice had that flat hush that means don't ask. Graham had been ranger here 23 years, lean as wire, eyes always rimmed red from swamp smoke. He liked rules and hated stories. That night, Graham ordered me onto the 0300 Gator survey. Night work in summer is work nobody wants, but I saddled the airboat and headed out alone. The swamp under starlight feels close and endless, thick with cricket pulse and the low crunch of gator jaws. My spotlight skated across yellow eyes by the dozen. At the far bend of Suwannee Canal, the motor coughed and died. The sudden silence hit like a slap. I waded aft to check the prop. Something bumped the hull. Not a gator. This hit hard, deliberate. I heard the scrape of claws under aluminum. Water lapped, then stilled. The airboat rocked once and stopped. I hauled myself aboard, yanked the starter, and the engine screamed back to life. I spun the light in a slow circle. Nothing. When I docked at the ranger station near dawn, Graham stood on the pier smoking. He looked past me at the airboat's hull. I followed his gaze. 3 gouges scored the metal, deep and parallel. "Big gator," I said. He nodded like he wanted to believe it. Then he crushed the smoke out and walked away without a word. The next day, a volunteer intern named Jalen Ortiz asked to join my patrol. 21, bright, fearless. We took the flat-bottom skiff south toward Chesser Prairie. Clouds turned gunmetal. We tied up beside a cypress rise and started the long foot loop. Jalen studied birds. I watched the waterline. Halfway round, we found a fresh kill. A feral hog, 100+ pounds, neck broken, flank peeled open in one clean strip. No struggle marks, no drag trail. Something fast, precise. Jalen gagged. I told him to photograph and log it. As he bent close, water exploded behind him. The creature came up like a torpedo, sleek, dark russet, thicker than a loggerhead at the shoulders, head like a blunt dog skull with otter whiskers spread wide. It moved on low legs, but in one bound cleared 10 feet. It hit Jalen full in the back, jaws clamping his pack straps. I grabbed the emergency flare, thumbed the striker, and rammed the burning stick against the creature's muzzle. It shrieked, high and whistling, let go, and slithered backward into water so black it swallowed the light. Jalen's pack saved his spine, but his shoulder bled. I patched him, radioed a medevac, and hauled him to the dock. Graham met us tight-jawed. "Animal attack," he said. "Gator." "No gator," I answered. "You know that." He leaned close. "Right gator. The refuge depends on tourists. A monster story kills the season." I wanted to argue, but Jalen was wheezing on the deck. I signed the gator line. That night, I broke into the evidence freezer. I needed proof. I found a cardboard box marked Boater Effects, Mobile, 7/12/09. Inside lay a torn camera strap, a map soaked brown, and a chunk of fiberglass hull battered but clean cut on one edge, as if sliced by a giant pruning shear. Graham had locked this away. I drove to his cabin on the edge of the refuge. The porch light glowed. Through the window, I saw a workbench cluttered with roadkill buckets, butcher knives, and a bait sling rigged with wire snares. He opened the door before I knocked. "You couldn't leave it," he said. "What is it, Graham?" He rubbed his eyes. "Old swamp dog. The Miccosukee spoke of it. Giant weasel that cleans the waters of sick things. I saw it first in '96 after the hurricane drove deer carcasses into the canals. It killed 2 poachers. I figured if it ate the trash hunters, maybe it was good." His voice cracked like dry reed. "So I fed. It. Roadkill to keep it deep in the interior, but each feed brought it closer. The boater couple. It learned boats mean food. His shoulders sagged. I tried to fix it. That's why I sent you out at night. I thought you'd scare it with the engine roar. It likes the silence. Lightning flicked across the horizon. Thunder rolled like a drum closing on us. We have to end this, I said. I will, he answered, and lifted a 12 gauge from behind the door. We took my skiff into the channel. Storm clouds hid the moon. Graham tossed 2 sacks of hog offal overboard. The water quivered. Something large circled under the hull, brushing it so softly the wood shivered. Graham flicked on a spotlight. The beam cut through rain. The creature rose right beside me. Its fur lay slick against muscle, eyes nickel bright. It surged, jaws opening sideways wider than a gator's gape. Graham fired once. The slug glanced off the skull with a sound like striking oak. The recoil threw him back. The second shot jammed. The creature heaved over the gunnel. Its shoulder slammed my chest. Ribs cracked. I smelled wet iron and swamp rot on its coat. Graham swung the butt of the shotgun. The creature snapped and tore half the stock off. It dragged Graham across the seats and into the water. I grabbed the flare gun, fired into its flank. Red light hissed, phosphor screaming into the rain. The creature twisted, released Graham, lunged at me. I thrust the broken shotgun barrel forward. It bit down, teeth sliding along steel, and its lower jaw dislocated with a pop. It recoiled, vanished under the churn. Graham's head surfaced. I hauled him back. His left arm hung by threads. He whispered, "Nest." He pointed toward Snake Island, a peat mound no one visited. I pushed the skiff, pain lancing through my ribs. We grounded on the island. Rain tapered to drizzle. Cypress knees rose like grave markers. At the center, hidden under palmetto, lay a den entrance chewed into peat. Bones ringed the pit. Deer, hog, something shaped like a human femur etched with tooth grooves. Inside, a low growl pulsed. I raised the last flare. The creature stood over 3 pale pups no bigger than raccoons. It bled along its flank, dark blood steaming in the cool rain. It did not charge. It only watched, eyes narrowed, guarding its brood. Graham sagged.
My phone's right here.
Young, he
My
muttered.
phone's right here.
I backed us away, never breaking its stare. On the skiff, Graham bled out. He died before dawn. I wrote the report. Ranger killed by lightning-felled limb while assisting gator survey. I burned the den coordinates from the map before filing. The refuge reopened 2 weeks later. Jalen recovered with a ragged scar across his back. I took the night patrols, but I never saw the creature again. I think it moved deeper where boats cannot go, raising those pups on fish and feral hogs, far from people. I learned later about the disappearances. A moonshiner named Elias Randall vanished on Billy's Island in 1947. 2 surveyors went missing in 1959 while mapping canal routes. Duck hunters disappeared in 1973, their blind ripped apart. 5 names, 5 years, all logged as drownings. Nothing ever found. Their bones are on Snake Island now, I am sure. And maybe more will join them if the swamp runs short of pigs. People drive hours to watch the sun rise over these waters, never knowing how thin the line is between the boardwalk and the dark beneath. I cross that line every night. Some nights I hear a whistle roll over the flat water. Not bird, not wind, something with lungs like mine. When it comes, I kill the spotlight and let the swamp go silent, because silence is the only thing that keeps the Okefenokee breathing. My name is Landon Vogel, and this happened to me in 2009, out at the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore in Wisconsin. I was a park ranger then, mostly seasonal work, but I loved the raw edge of Lake Superior, the bite of the wind even in summer. My job was straightforward: patrol the islands, check on campers, assist with lighthouse maintenance, keep the wild wild. That year, the wild decided to bite back. It started subtly, like most things that end badly. We had a maintenance crew, good guys, Elias Thorne and his younger cousin, Jimmy Acosta, working on the Raspberry Island Lighthouse. They were repointing brickwork, scraping old paint, routine stuff. They'd camp on the island for a few days at a time, radio in each